Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity by Peter Attia, MD, with Bill Gifford. Picture this. You're having the same nightmare over and over again for years. You're standing on some grimy city street, clutching a padded basket for dear life. High above you, from the tops of skyscrapers, eggs are plummeting down. One after another, they come screaming toward the pavement. Your job? Catch 'em. So there you are, sprinting back and forth, baskets stretched out like you're fielding pop flies in the World Series, desperately trying to save each one before it explodes on the concrete. But here's the thing. They're falling way too fast. You manage to catch a few, sure, but most of them? They shatter spectacularly, painting your shoes with bright yellow yolk. And you feel it rising inside you, this crushing wave of panic and helplessness. Because no matter how fast you run, no matter how hard you try, you'll never catch them all. Then you jolt awake, heart racing, another night of badly needed sleep completely wrecked. This was the recurring nightmare that tormented Dr. Peter Attia during his surgical residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where he was training to become one of the world's top cancer surgeons. By all measures, he was crushing it, performing incredibly complex operations on patients with the nastiest, most aggressive cancers imaginable. He was getting better and better at catching those eggs. In the operating room, he and his team were basically performing miracles, removing tumors that other surgeons wouldn't dare touch. But then a brutal truth started to sink in. The victories in the operating room felt empty. Because even after a flawless surgery, nearly all these patients would still be dead within a few years. He was catching the egg, only to watch it splatter on the ground a few seconds later. He was saving people from dying quickly, only to see them die slowly instead. The frustration became so overwhelming that he actually quit medicine entirely. But that dream, the falling eggs, it never left him. And eventually, like a lightning bolt, the real meaning hit him. The solution wasn't to get better at catching the eggs as they fell. The solution was to get to the top of the building, find whoever was throwing them, and make them stop. Today, we're diving into his masterpiece, Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity. This isn't just another health book telling you to eat more vegetables. It's a revolutionary operating manual for how to think about your entire life. Dr. Attia came back to medicine with a completely transformed mission, not to treat sickness after it arrives, but to build an entirely new kind of medicine, focused on preventing the diseases of aging before they ever get started. By the end of this journey, you'll understand this new framework inside and out. You'll know who the 4 horsemen of chronic disease are, why they're the ones hurling eggs off that rooftop, and you'll have a strategic playbook to stop them, so you can not just live longer, but live better for way longer than you ever imagined possible. To understand this revolutionary approach, we first need to understand the world we're actually living in. Peter Attia calls it the age of slow death. For most of human history, we died from what he calls fast death. Infections, injuries, childbirth, violence. Life was brutal and often really short. A simple paper cut could spiral into a deadly infection. Medicine was basically educated guesswork for centuries. But then, in the mid-1800s, something incredible happened. We discovered germs. We developed antibiotics, proper sanitation, and modern surgery. We entered what Attia calls the era of Medicine 2.0. And honestly, Medicine 2.0 is nothing short of miraculous. It's why we can set a broken bone, cure pneumonia, and transplant hearts. It got incredibly skilled at pulling drowning people out of the river and saving their lives. But here's the catch. A whole new problem emerged. As we conquered the causes of fast death, A different set of killers stepped up to take their place. These are the diseases of aging, the ones that don't kill you overnight, but grind you down slowly over decades. Attia calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, and type 2 diabetes, along with all its related metabolic disasters. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Odds are, one of these 4 will eventually be what takes you out. And this is where Medicine 2.0 fundamentally fails. It treats these slow-burning, chronic diseases with the exact same mindset it uses for fast, acute emergencies. It waits for the disease to show its face, for the person to be actively drowning, and then it swoops in to intervene. It waits until the eggs are already mid-flight. By the time someone has a heart attack, the underlying disease has likely been building up in their arteries for 20 years. By the time a tumor shows up on a scan, it may have been quietly growing for a decade. By the time someone gets diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, their metabolic health has been circling the drain for ages. Medicine 2.0 arrives to the party way too late. Peter Attia realized this wasn't just an abstract professional problem. It was deeply, painfully personal. After walking away from medicine, he found himself at age 36 on a beach in Catalina, having just finished a punishing 21-mile ocean swim. He'd just accomplished this incredible feat of endurance. He was technically an athlete, but as he stood there catching his breath, his wife turned to him and said with all the love in the world, "Peter, I think you should work on being a little less not thin." It was like getting splashed with cold water. He was 50 pounds overweight. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a classic dad bod staring back. But the blood tests? Even worse. Despite exercising like a maniac, he'd become insulin resistant, which is basically the first stop on the train to type 2 diabetes. His testosterone was shockingly low, and he knew his family tree was littered with men who died young from heart disease. He was 36 years old, a brand new father, and he was clearly on the highway toward an early, slow death. He had become the patient he used to see lying in those hospital beds. This moment changed absolutely everything. He decided to turn his brilliant, obsessive mind toward solving one problem: how to get off that highway. He wasn't going to wait around for the eggs to start falling. He was going to climb to that rooftop himself. This is where Medicine 3.0 was born. Medicine 3.0 represents a radical shift in thinking. It's not about waiting for a diagnosis to come knock on your door. It's about proactive preventative medicine that starts right now, today, no matter what age you are. It has one crystal clear goal: to extend your health span, not just your lifespan. What's the difference? Lifespan is straightforward. It's how many years you're alive. Health span is how well you're actually living during those years. Think about the mythical Greek figure Tithonus. He was granted eternal life, but forgot to ask for eternal youth. So he lived forever, but his body just withered and decayed endlessly. He had an infinite lifespan, but a terrible, terrible health span. Most of us, if we're being totally honest, are headed for a similar fate. Those last 10 years of life, what Attia calls the marginal decade, are usually marked by frailty, mental decline, and chronic disease. We're technically alive, but we're not really living. Medicine 3.0 is designed to change that equation. It aims to square the curve. Imagine a graph where the horizontal line represents your lifespan, and the vertical line represents your health span, your physical and mental function. For most people, that health span line starts curving downward somewhere in their 40s or 50s, leading to a long, slow decline. Medicine 2.0 might step in at the very end and stretch that line a bit further to the right, giving you a few extra years of pretty miserable life. Squaring the curve means keeping your health span riding high for as long as humanly possible, then having a relatively short, rapid decline right at the very end. You live better for longer, and your marginal decade transforms into a bonus decade full of vitality. So how do we actually do this? We need to declare all-out war on the four horsemen, and the first and most fundamental battlefield is our metabolism. Attia argues convincingly that metabolic dysfunction is the toxic soil from which the other three horsemen grow. And it often starts silently, in an organ we almost never think about, the liver. He shares a haunting story from his residency about operating on a patient with colon cancer. When they opened the guy up, they saw his liver. A healthy liver is this deep, gorgeous purple color. This man's liver? Mottled, orangish, and smothered in yellow fat. It looked like the ravaged liver of a hardcore alcoholic. But the patient swore up and down he barely drank at all. He was one of the early casualties of a silent epidemic now called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. Today, more than 1 in 4 people on Earth has it. It's the physical signature of a body that's been completely overwhelmed with energy. Think of your body like a bathtub. The water streaming from the faucet represents the calories you eat. The drain is the energy you burn through activity. For most of our lives, especially if we're not super active, we're pouring way more water into that tub than is going down the drain. At first, no big deal. Our subcutaneous fat, the squishy fat under our skin, acts like the bathtub itself. It's actually the safest place to store that excess energy. But everyone's bathtub is a different size. Some people have a massive jacuzzi. Others have a tiny bucket. This is mostly determined by genetics. When your personal bathtub fills up completely, but that faucet just keeps running, the water has to go somewhere. It overflows. This fat spillover is where the real trouble kicks in. The excess energy, in the form of fat, starts piling up in places it absolutely shouldn't be. In your muscles, around your heart, in your pancreas, and especially in your liver. That's NAFLD right there. It also accumulates as visceral fat, the truly dangerous fat buried deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your organs. This isn't just passive storage sitting there quietly. Visceral fat actively pumps out inflammatory chemicals that actively promote disease. One of the first casualties of this spillover is your muscle cells. Tiny fat droplets start disrupting the cellular machinery that's supposed to pull glucose from your blood. The cells become deaf to insulin's signal, the hormone that's supposed to usher glucose inside. This is literally the definition of insulin resistance. Your pancreas senses trouble and starts shouting louder, cranking out more and more insulin to try forcing that glucose into the resistant cells. For a while, this brute force approach actually works. Your blood sugar might still look perfectly normal on a standard test. But your insulin levels? Sky high. This state is called hyperinsulinemia, and it's the canary dying in the coal mine of metabolic disease. Eventually, your pancreas gets exhausted, and your cells become so resistant that blood sugar finally starts climbing. First, you slip into prediabetes. Then, full-blown type 2 diabetes hits. But as Attia hammers home, a diabetes diagnosis isn't the beginning of your problem. It's the final stage of a long destructive process that started years, maybe even decades, earlier with that very first bit of fat spillover. This entire metabolic catastrophe, from fatty liver to insulin resistance to diabetes, creates the perfect breeding ground for the other horsemen to thrive. The chronic inflammation, elevated insulin, and high blood sugar act like fertilizer for heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's. So tackling metabolic health is strategy number one. But how does this connect to the planet's deadliest killer, heart disease? This hits close to home for Attia. His family history is packed with men who died of heart attacks in their 40s. So even after getting his own metabolic health sorted, he knew he was still playing with fire. And the conventional wisdom about heart disease, he discovered it's dangerously oversimplified. For decades, we've been fed a simple story. There's good HDL cholesterol and bad LDL cholesterol. Eat less saturated fat and dietary cholesterol. Keep your LDL number low and you'll be fine. It's the clogged pipe model, like bacon grease going down your kitchen sink. This story, Attia says bluntly, is almost completely wrong. First off, the cholesterol you actually eat in food has very little to do with the cholesterol floating around in your bloodstream. Your body, mostly your liver, manufactures the vast majority of it. Cholesterol itself isn't some villain. It's absolutely essential for life. Your body uses it to build every single cell membrane and to make critical hormones like testosterone and estrogen. The real problem isn't cholesterol itself. It's the boats that ferry it through your bloodstream. Since cholesterol is a fat and your blood is watery, they can't mix. So cholesterol gets packaged into little particles called lipoproteins. HDL and LDL are just two types of these transport boats. The issue isn't how much cholesterol cargo is stuffed into your LDL boats. That's what a standard LDL-C test measures. The real issue is how many LDL boats you have cruising around. Attia uses a brilliant analogy here. Imagine a busy street representing your artery. The houses lining it are your artery wall. The fence in front of each house is the delicate single-cell layer called the endothelium. The LDL boats are like little cars driving down the street. Atherosclerosis, heart disease, doesn't start because there's too much cargo crammed in each car. It starts when one of those cars crashes through the fence and gets stuck in someone's front yard. The more cars on that street, the higher the odds of a crash. Every single one of these potentially dangerous boats has a specific protein marker on its surface, like a license plate, called apolipoprotein B or ApoB. Measuring your ApoB level tells you the total number of these dangerous cars cruising your streets. This number, Attia argues passionately, is the single most important metric for assessing your heart disease risk, way more predictive than a standard cholesterol panel. But shockingly, most doctors still don't routinely test for it. The disease process kicks off when one of these ApoB particles punches through the endothelium and gets trapped. This triggers your immune system. Macrophages, basically the cleanup crew, rush in to gobble up the trapped particle. They become bloated foam cells, which form a fatty streak. This is the very first baby step of an atherosclerotic plaque. And here's what's truly terrifying. Autopsies of young people who died in accidents show these fatty streaks can be found in teenagers. Heart disease is a lifelong process. It literally starts in childhood. Over decades, this process keeps grinding away. The plaque grows, developing a tough, fibrous cap over a gooey core of lipids and dead cells. Most of the time, this happens in complete silence. But if that cap ruptures, your body forms a blood clot to heal the wound. If that clot is big enough to block the artery completely, or if it breaks off and travels to your heart or brain, boom, you have a heart attack or stroke. And get this, the most common first symptom of heart disease isn't chest pain or shortness of breath, it's sudden death. So the strategy for defeating horseman number one is aggressive, early prevention. It means driving down the number of those ApoB particles as low as possible for as long as possible. The goal, he says, is getting your ApoB levels back down to where they were when you were a little kid. You can do this through better nutrition, regular exercise, and for many people, especially those with scary genetic risk, medications like statins. But the crucial point is to start thinking about this in your 30s and 40s, not your 60s. The 10-year risk window that Medicine 2.0 uses is absurdly short. We need to be playing a lifelong game here. What about cancer, the runaway cell? This was Attia's original battlefield, and you can feel his frustration radiating off the page. The war on cancer, officially declared over 50 years ago, has been a humbling, devastating failure. For most major cancers, death rates have barely budged at all. Why is cancer so brutally hard to beat? First, it's not one disease, it's thousands. One woman's breast cancer is genetically completely different from the breast cancer of the woman in the next exam room. Second, we almost always discover it way too late. So Attia's strategy for cancer has three prongs: prevention where it's possible, much better early detection, and more precisely targeted treatments. The low-hanging fruit for prevention? Right back where we started, metabolic health. We've known since Otto Warburg's work in the 1920s that cancer cells have an absolutely voracious, almost psychotic appetite for glucose. They metabolize it completely differently than healthy cells, in a way that churns out building blocks for explosive growth. High levels of insulin and its molecular cousin, insulin-like growth factor IGF-1, act like rocket fuel for many types of cancer. Obesity is a leading risk factor for at least 13 different cancer types. So keeping your metabolic health in check, dodging insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, is a core part of any serious anti-cancer strategy. It's about not creating a lush, fertile garden for cancer cells to thrive in. But what about early detection? This, Attia believes with fierce conviction, is where the next great medical revolution will happen. Right now, our screening tools are embarrassingly clumsy. A standard scan can't even see a tumor until it's about 1 centimeter across. But a 1 centimeter tumor already contains roughly 1 billion cells. That's not early detection. That's late detection with better lighting. The future lies in liquid biopsies, blood tests that can detect microscopic fragments of DNA shed by cancer cells, called cell-free DNA. This technology is advancing at a breathtaking pace. Tests like the Gallery test can now screen for over 50 types of cancer from a single blood draw. They can not only tell you cancer is lurking somewhere, but often pinpoint where in your body it's hiding. The goal is finding cancer when it's just a few million cells, not 1 billion, when it's tiny, localized, and far more treatable. Catching cancer at stage 1 or stage 2 instead of stage 4 is literally the difference between a high probability of survival and what's essentially a death sentence. In treatments, Attia gets genuinely excited about immunotherapy, the revolutionary idea of turbocharging your own immune system to fight cancer. The story of James D'Angelo, whose metastatic stomach cancer mysteriously vanished on its own, proved that sometimes the body can defeat cancer all by itself. Immunotherapy drugs like checkpoint inhibitors essentially unmask cancer cells, allowing your T cells, the elite assassins of your immune system, to recognize and obliterate them. This approach saved former President Jimmy Carter from metastatic melanoma. The combination of radically better, earlier detection and more powerful, laser-targeted immunotherapies offers the first genuine hope in decades that we might actually start winning the war against this horseman. The third horseman is arguably the most terrifying: neurodegenerative disease, specifically Alzheimer's. More than cancer or heart disease, people fear losing their minds, their memories, their very essence of self. Attia shares the story of a 40-year-old patient named Stephanie. She came to him perfectly healthy, just interested in longevity. But a routine genetic test dropped a bomb. She had 2 copies of the APOE4 gene variant, which meant her lifetime risk of developing Alzheimer's was up to 12 times higher than average. She was understandably terrified. For decades, the Alzheimer's story was dominated by the amyloid hypothesis, the idea that the disease is caused by sticky plaques of a protein called amyloid beta gunking up the brain. Billions upon billions of dollars have been dumped into developing drugs to clear these plaques, and literally every single one has catastrophically failed to stop or even slow the disease's relentless march. This spectacular failure has forced a major rethinking. What if amyloid plaques aren't the cause but actually a consequence of the disease? Or maybe just one piece of a much bigger, messier puzzle? 2 newer theories are emerging that offer way more hope for actual prevention. The first is the vascular hypothesis, which suggests Alzheimer's is fundamentally a disease of the brain's blood supply. Your brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ, hogging 20% of your body's oxygen, despite being only 2% of its weight. Anything that chokes off blood flow, atherosclerosis in the brain's tiny vessels, high blood pressure, chronic inflammation, creates a neuronal energy crisis. The neurons start starving to death. This, the theory goes, triggers the whole cascade of cell death and plaque formation. Bottom line, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. The second theory is the metabolic hypothesis. There's a powerful, undeniable link between type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's, so strong that some scientists have dubbed Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. The brains of Alzheimer's patients show a profound inability to use glucose for fuel. Insulin resistance throughout your body gets mirrored by insulin resistance in your brain. This energy crisis, once again, leads directly to cell death. The APOE4 gene seems to make everything exponentially worse. It's involved in cholesterol transport in the brain, linked to crappier glucose metabolism, and promotes inflammation. For people like Stephanie carrying this genetic burden, metabolic and vascular risk factors become even more dangerous. So the strategy against this horseman is, yet again, early and aggressive prevention, starting decades before any symptoms even whisper. It means optimizing cardiovascular health to keep robust blood flow to your brain. It means optimizing metabolic health to keep your brain's fuel supply lines wide open. And the single most powerful tool for all of this? Exercise. Study after study shows an incredibly strong link between cardiorespiratory fitness and dramatically reduced dementia risk. Exercise supercharges glucose metabolism, crushes inflammation, and actively promotes the growth of brand new neurons. Attia puts it bluntly. It is, full stop and hands down, the best tool we have in the neurodegeneration prevention toolkit. So we've got our objective, a long, vibrant health span. We've got our strategy, a proactive, lifelong war against the 4 horsemen, with metabolic health as the foundation. Now comes the million-dollar question. What are the actual tactics? What do we do? This is where Attia introduces his genius framework, the centenarian decathlon. He asks you to imagine yourself in your last decade of life, your 90s, maybe even past 100. What 10 physical tasks do you want to be able to do? These aren't Olympic events. They're the humble, beautiful events of everyday life. Maybe one event is effortlessly lifting up your great-grandchild. Another is getting yourself up off the floor without using your hands. Hauling 2 heavy bags of groceries up a flight of stairs without breathing hard. Hiking a 1.5 miles on your favorite trail. Wrestling around with your dog. This becomes your personal decathlon, your specific, tangible vision for your health span. And once you nail down that vision, you can work backward to figure out how you need to train for it today. To lift a 30-pound grandchild at age 90, you have to account for the natural, inevitable decline in strength that happens with aging, which means you need to be significantly stronger today than you think. You're not just training for the present moment. You're building up a massive reserve of strength and capacity to draw from for the rest of your life. Strength training is literally a form of retirement saving. Attia breaks exercise down into 4 essential pillars. 1. Strength. This is your foundation. He emphasizes functional movements that translate directly to real life. Grip strength, so you can actually open a stubborn jar, pulling movements, and hip hinging patterns like deadlifts and squats, so you can get out of a chair with ease. 2. Stability. This is the tragically forgotten pillar. It's about neuromuscular control, training your brain and body to work together to transmit force safely and efficiently. It's about moving the way we did as babies, before years of slouching in chairs taught us terrible habits. This is the secret key to preventing the injuries that so often derail people as they age. 3. Aerobic Efficiency Zone 2. Training. This is low-intensity cardio. Think a brisk walk or easy jog where you can still hold a conversation comfortably. This type of training is absolutely the best for improving the health of your mitochondria, the tiny power plants inside your cells. Healthy mitochondria are crucial for metabolic flexibility, the ability to burn both fat and glucose for fuel seamlessly. Attia recommends 3 to 4 hours of Zone 2 work per week. 4. Peak aerobic fitness VO2 max. Training VO2 max measures your body's maximum capacity to use oxygen. It's one of the most powerful markers for longevity ever discovered. The data is jaw-dropping. Having an elite VO2 max for your age and sex is linked to a 5-fold lower risk of death compared to someone in the bottom quartile. You train this with short, brutal interval workouts, like 4 minutes at the highest pace you can sustain, followed by 4 minutes of recovery, repeated several times. This 4-pillar framework ensures you're not training for just one event, but for the entire decathlon of life. Next up, nutrition. Attia calls his approach Nutrition 3.0. It's not a diet. It's a personalized framework grounded in nutritional biochemistry. He deliberately avoids the religious wars of vegan versus keto versus carnivore. Instead, he focuses on 3 fundamental levers you can pull. 1. Caloric restriction (CR). How much you eat. This is the most powerful lever for metabolic health and weight management, but it's brutally hard to sustain because it requires obsessive tracking. 2. Dietary restriction (DR). What you eat or don't eat. This is what most diets actually are. You eliminate a category of food, like carbs or animal products. This can work, but only if it creates a sustainable caloric deficit without sacrificing essential nutrients. 3. Time restriction trail. When you eat. This includes intermittent fasting. Attia finds this to be the least effective tool for most people, since it's ridiculously easy to binge during your eating window, and it can make getting enough protein really difficult. His core principles are refreshingly simple. First, get as far away as possible from the standard American diet loaded with ultra-processed garbage. Second, make absolutely sure you're getting enough protein, roughly 1 gram per pound of body weight per day, to preserve precious muscle mass as you age. This is critical. Third, Use technology like a continuous glucose monitor (CGM) to understand how your unique body responds to different foods. This enables true personalization, moving beyond guesswork into real data. The third major tactic is sleep. Attia used to be a proud sleep hater, a classic "I'll sleep when I'm dead" type. He tells a genuinely terrifying story of falling asleep at the wheel after a 60-hour shift and waking up 6 hours later in the middle of a park notorious as an open-air drug market, miraculously still alive. He now calls sleep the absolute best medicine for your brain. Poor sleep, even just for one night, wreaks absolute havoc on your metabolism, causing severe insulin resistance. It cripples your immune system, spikes your blood pressure, and scrambles the hormones that control hunger. Most importantly, deep sleep is when your brain literally cleans itself. A specialized system called the glymphatic system flushes out metabolic garbage, including amyloid beta. Chronic, crappy sleep is a powerful risk factor for Alzheimer's. The prescription is straightforward: 7.5 to 8.5 hours of high-quality sleep every single night. He offers a whole toolkit of strategies: keeping your room cool and dark, ditching screens before bed, avoiding alcohol, and getting bright morning sunlight to properly set your circadian rhythm. But as Attia's journey continued, he discovered there was one final, absolutely crucial piece of the longevity puzzle. And it was the one he'd been completely ignoring his entire life. He'd become a total master of his physical health. He'd hacked his diet, optimized his exercise, perfected his sleep. He was basically the picture of perfect health. But on the inside, he was utterly miserable. He was driven by this relentless, simmering anger. A perfectionist obsessed with achievement, but it was all fueled by deep-seated insecurity and self-loathing. His relationships were crumbling around him. He was emotionally disconnected from his wife and kids. He shares a heartbreaking story. He was away on a work trip when his wife called in a panic. Their 1-month-old son had stopped breathing. She'd performed CPR and miraculously saved his life. When she told him what happened, his first instinctive response wasn't empathy or overwhelming relief. It was a cold, clinical question. "Okay, so what do you need me to do?" He was broken. His journey into emotional health took him to 2 separate inpatient treatment centers, where he was finally forced to confront the true source of his pain: severe childhood trauma. He'd buried it for decades, adapting by building this massive fortress of achievement and rage around himself. But the fortress had become a prison. This is where Outlive transcends being just a typical health book and becomes something profoundly deeper. Attia argues passionately that emotional health is actually the most important component of healthspan. Longevity is completely meaningless if you're miserable the whole time. And that misery can destroy your physical health just as surely as any of the 4 horsemen. Through intense therapy, using frameworks like dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, he learned the essential tools to regulate his emotions, build genuine distress tolerance, and reframe his toxic, self-destructive thought patterns. He learned to distinguish between his resume virtues, the accomplishments he could list on his CV, and his eulogy virtues, the things people would actually say about him after he's gone. He realized with crushing clarity that he'd spent his entire life obsessively collecting the former, while completely neglecting the latter. His quest for longevity had been driven by fear of death, but through this painful transformative work, his entire perspective shifted. It was no longer about hacking biology to dodge an inevitable endpoint. It became about enriching the actual experience of being alive. Right now, today. It became about genuine connection, real purpose, and love. He was no longer just trying to outlive death. He was finally learning how to truly live. When you finish a book like Outlive, it's honestly hard to see the world the same way ever again. It's one of those rare works that doesn't just hand you information. It fundamentally rewires your relationship with your own life. The most powerful lesson, at least for me, is this radical shift in responsibility. Peter Attia's entire philosophy rests on moving from being a passive passenger in your own health journey to becoming the captain of the ship. Medicine 2.0, our current system, treats us exactly like passengers. We cruise through life, and when the ship inevitably smacks into an iceberg, a sudden heart attack, a shocking cancer diagnosis, we frantically call for help, and the medical system rushes in to desperately patch the holes. Medicine 3.0 says something completely different. You are the captain. It's your responsibility to study the maps, watch the radar constantly, spot those icebergs looming on the distant horizon, and steer a bold new course long before you're anywhere near danger. This is an incredibly empowering idea. It means we're not helpless victims of our genes or the aging process. Our longevity is way more malleable than we've been led to believe. The second profound insight is just how interconnected everything really is. In our hyper-specialized world, we tend to think of heart disease as a plumbing problem, cancer as a genetic dice roll, and Alzheimer's as some cruel cosmic mystery. Attia masterfully demonstrates how they're all deeply intertwined, often sprouting from the common root of metabolic dysfunction. And this realization is incredibly hopeful. It means the actions you take to improve your metabolic health, through smart exercise, better nutrition, and quality sleep, aren't just fighting one isolated disease. You're waging a coordinated, multi-front war against all four horsemen simultaneously. The same things you do to slash your diabetes risk also dramatically lower your risk of cancer and Alzheimer's. There's an incredible elegance and efficiency to this whole approach. So where do you actually start? It can feel genuinely overwhelming. But Attia's framework is deliberately designed to be built one brick at a time. Here are 3 simple, practical actions you can take literally today, inspired directly by the book. First, just start moving, but with a specific purpose. Go for a brisk, 45-minute walk. The intensity should be right at that sweet spot where you can still hold a conversation, but just barely. This is Zone 2. Don't obsess over heart rate monitors or fancy lactate meters yet. Just find that comfortable conversational pace. Congratulations! You've just taken your first real step toward building a healthier mitochondrial foundation. Second, do a simple thought experiment. Sit down somewhere quiet for 10 minutes and write out your own personal centenarian decathlon. What are the 10 physical things you want to be able to do with ease and pure joy when you're 90? Don't hold back or censor yourself. Be wildly ambitious. Do you want to travel freely? Dance at your great-grandchild's wedding? Carry your own luggage through the airport without help? This isn't just a fitness plan. It's a compelling vision for your future self. It gives all your efforts today a powerful, emotional why. Third, for the next week, simply observe your sleep. Don't try to fix anything yet. Just notice, when do you actually go to bed? When do you wake up? How do you genuinely feel in the morning? This simple act of observation, without any judgment, is the crucial first step toward understanding one of the most powerful levers you have for transforming your health. Outlive is way more than just a book. It's a manifesto. It's a rallying call to stop being passive recipients of whatever fate throws at us, and to become the active, intentional architects of our own future. It's a powerful reminder that the ultimate goal isn't just mechanically adding years to our life, but richly adding life to our years. That was a summary of Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity by Peter Attia, MD. We've touched on the major themes today, but I need to be completely honest with you. A summary is like flipping through a glossy travel brochure for the Grand Canyon. It can show you the beautiful pictures, but it can never ever replicate the actual feeling of standing on that rim, feeling the wind whipping past, and witnessing the sheer, breathtaking scale of it with your own eyes. The real magic of this book happens when you actually read it yourself. It's in those quiet moments when one of Attia's stories or a particular scientific insight suddenly connects with your own life in a way you never expected. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked even a small fire inside you, I genuinely encourage you to grab a copy for yourself. Reading it isn't just about passively absorbing facts. It's an experience that can genuinely transform the way you see your health, your future, and your daily life. The link to the book is right there in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take just a moment to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're heading in the right direction, and make sure you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.